Benvenuti. This is the Italian News in English podcast for the week of August 13th, 2012. Mi chiamo Gio, reporting today from Chicago on these recent stories in Italian news. According to ANSA, Italy's leading news service, key economic indicators continue to suggest gloomy days ahead for the Italian economy. Industrial output fell 8.2% this June, in comparison with June 2011, the largest one-year decline in the European Union, and a record public debt of 1.973 billion euros, almost 125% of the country's gross domestic product, continues to cause anxiety. Unemployment in July continued at just over 10%, while unemployment among Italians 25 years old and younger remained at a staggering 34%. Prime Minister Mario Monti, a so-called technocrat, an unassuming, straight-arrow economist working to clean up the mess left by Silvio Berlusconi, seems determined to keep a calm, steady hand on the wheel as Italy struggles to address decades of government waste, corruption, and tax evasion. But even as budget cuts and reforms are being implemented, the cost of servicing Italy's large debt continues to drive up expenses. Meanwhile, the cuts pose even greater challenges for the Italian people. The Corriere della Sera reports that in order to save about 10 billion euros a year, at least 100,000 public jobs will be eliminated. Healthcare cuts will mean less funding for medicine, supplies, and services through the National Health Service. Local governments will have to get along without relied upon federal funding. Municipalities 500 million euros less this year and 1 billion less next year. And for public workers who do keep their positions, mandatory unpaid holidays, salary reductions of at least 15%, and new strict spending limits on everything from meal vouchers, a 7-euro limit, to use of government automobiles. The Courier also reports that over the past 10 years, Italians, due largely to deregulation and competition in the energy sector, have seen water bills rise nearly 70%, natural gas 57%, waste collection fees 55%, and electricity 38%. All the while, inflation in Italy has risen almost 25%. And yet Mario Monti said last week he believes there is no chance Italy will need a Greek-style bailout from the EU. What makes Mr. Monti think Italy won't need a European rescue? He has hopes that the EU will soon reach a union-wide agreement on bank monitoring. He places confidence in the Union's anticipated growth measures, and above all, Monti demonstrates, at least publicly, an unwavering faith in the eventual positive impact of Italy's own belt-tightening and his efforts as Prime Minister to make an honest beginning at reducing the country's legendary corruption and waste. But even Monti admits that some form of help from Europe may be needed during the recovery and reform processes. He told the Courier recently, "We do not need aid, thank heaven. There is absolutely no question of a bailout. We have the most robust public finances in the Eurozone. But," he added, "Italy might require an accompanying action for financial stability, which we reserve the right to evaluate." That's the tightrope Monti is forced to walk, between communicating the gravity of Italy's grim economic and political circumstances as a justification for painful austerity and strict reform, and signaling optimism about better days to come for all Italians, sometime, as a result of those hard measures. As he performs this high-wire act, everyone, from former Prime Minister and Bunga Bunga champion Silvio Berlusconi, labor unions, political opponents left and right, organized crime bosses, regional and municipal officials, and everyday Italians just fed up with the whole mess, they attempt to push or pull him down, all with their own motivations, some noble and some not. At the time of this broadcast, the Prime Minister is vacationing in the Swiss Alps with his family, a familiar place he's visited for many years. Given the scope of the task ahead of him, Mr. Monti will need all the rest he can get. We'll be back in less than 1 minute with news briefs from across Italia.
In rain-drenched drenched clouds, I thought aloud, my shadow walks alone. House like graves and working slaves who'll never leave this town. And the trains they roll, tugboats move below, the skyway in the fall. I moved through town, an optimistic clown. I was feeling grain elevator tall. I was a young man then, I'm still young now. It's only life anyhow.
That was Chicago power pop artist Phil Angotti of Calabrese ancestry, with a bit of the 95th Street Bridge song. You can purchase Phil's music on iTunes. Search for Angotti, A-N-G-O-T-T-I. And now, these news briefs. Milano has joined Turin and Napoli in registering same-sex couples in civil unions, guaranteeing them access to all services provided by the city. While this does not mean that same-sex couples will enjoy the same rights as married heterosexual couples, including inheriting pensions, this move on the municipal level is seen as a step toward full marriage equality by Italian civil rights activists. Former Siena footballer Emanuele Pesoli, 31 years of age, chained himself to the fence outside the Italian Football Federation's headquarters in Rome last Saturday and has begun a hunger strike in protest against a 3-year ban from football for match fixing. The current member of the Chievo Verona squad says he is innocent of the charges, while his former manager in Tuscany, Antonio Conti, now coach of Serie A winning Juventus, has been banned for 10 months for not reporting the match fixing while leading Pesoli's club. Prosecutors in Palermo say former Prime Minister Silvio Berlusconi paid 40 million euros in hush money to an Italian senator and political ally with close ties to the mafia in order to keep damaging information about mafia connections secret. In an odd twist of circumstances, Berlusconi is actually being portrayed as the victim of blackmail in this trial, whereas the colorful billionaire is much more accustomed to being a defendant, having at various times been accused of bribery, tax fraud, sex with a minor female, media manipulation, and portraying Italian women as objects. In addition, recent reports suggest that Berlusconi may actually run for prime minister again in the spring of 2013, when Mario Monti says he will stand down. After all Berlusconi has put Italy through, will Italians return to the polls next year to bring him, Bunga Bunga parties, and the People of Freedom Party back? Time will tell. ANSA reports that Italian beer exports have doubled in the last 5 years, with the country's light lagers and more flavorful reds even growing in popularity as food pairings among Italian chefs. The report states that beer has just about pulled even with wine as a choice for weekend meals out, with about 2/3 of the beer consumed on a given weekend coming from Italy itself, including Peroni, Nastro Azzurro, and Moretti, along with smaller craft brews from across the country, like lagers from Trieste, Piemonte, Sardinia, and the South Tyrol. Analysts predict the growth will continue as the quality of Italian lager, especially as a light and refreshing pairing with food, is recognized. Finally, Venice, once a proud, wealthy, powerful republic, is today a beautiful, one-of-a-kind, decaying city that sustains itself on the revenue generated from tourism. But as ANSA reports, Venetian tourism officials are now distraught over the potential financial impact of the seagulls that are taking over their beaches. While a specially trained falcon had been employed previously to keep the beaches on Lido Island clear of the bold, pesky gulls, the falcon hasn't been seen in a while, and some tourist officials are wondering if the scheme fell prey to budget cuts. They warn if the city doesn't address the problem soon, the well-heeled tourists who frequent those hotels, and more importantly their money, could go elsewhere. That's all for this edition of Italian News in English. We'll be back soon with another episode. Grazie mille e ciao.